Dominic Cummings shares. It is simply madness that Boris Johnson is British Prime Minister, said his ex-advisor. In corona politics, he gave the government a damning testimony. Dominic Cummings has been disclosing alleged internal information about the British government's corona strategy for weeks. Now Boris Johnson's former chief advisor had to speak out in the House of Commons and has again made serious allegations against the British government. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's cabinet failed in the fight against the pandemic. Johnson initially underestimated the risk of corona, Cummings claims. In February 2020, Boris Johnson thought it was just a scary story. He thought it was the new swine flu. He went on to claim that Johnson said, "I'm going to get Chief Medical Advisor Chris Whitty to inject me with the coronavirus live on TV so everyone can see it's nothing before he must be afraid." Johnson later actually contracted the virus and had to be treated in an intensive care unit for days. The Prime Minister's girlfriend, Carrie Symonds, was completely crazy at the height of the pandemic, Cummings continued. The reason for this was an article in the Times that dealt with the couple's dog. Symonds had insisted that the Prime Minister's press department take care of it. In addition, Cummings reiterated his allegations against the British government. "When the public needed us most, the government failed," he said. "The truth is that ministers, senior officials and senior advisors like me have been catastrophically below the standard the public can expect from their government in such a crisis," he said. "The government failed to see the signs of the spreading pandemic," said Cummings, who was Johnson's most important and influential advisor at that time. It was only at the end of February 2020 that it was seen that the contingency plans were hollow. Cummings apologized to the relatives of the corona deaths. The ex-advisor spoke to members of two lower houses committees of the British Parliament. He left the government in a dispute in November 2020 and, according to many observers, has since been on a campaign of revenge against Johnson. In the House of Commons, he also said that Johnson had been told on March 14th last year that he had to enforce a lockdown. However, the government had no plans for this. "It was a big mistake on my part," said Cummings when asked if he had intervened with Johnson too late. "I bitterly regret not pressing the panic button earlier," he said. In retrospect, there is no doubt that this was wrong. Cummings also fundamentally criticized the British political system and personnel. As evidence, he cited that there were only two options in the previous election: a government led by Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn. In a system that puts people in front of such a choice, something went extremely badly, he said. There are thousands of people with better leadership skills. "It was also crazy that someone like himself could have so much power," said Cummings. "And it is crazy that Johnson became Prime Minister. The government apparatus needed to explain how so many unsuspecting people could hold high-ranking positions." Cummings also complained that there were no clear responsibilities in the UK government and still do not exist to this day. Different ministers and authorities each referred to others in the corona crisis. Cummings said it would have been better to have some kind of dictator to handle the corona crisis. If he had been Prime Minister, Cummings said, he would have designated data specialist Mark Warner and given him royal authority over the government apparatus. Cummings painted the picture of a completely clueless, overwhelmed and incompetent Johnson administration. The data system in the government headquarters initially consisted of a whiteboard on which he wrote things. For security reasons, for example, computers were not allowed at meetings, so no one had the relevant data available. When asked why it took 2 months to install a test system, Cummings said that at the beginning of the corona crisis, the government sort of fell apart. Recently, Cummings had been critical of the government's handling of the pandemic on several occasions. Most recently, he claimed on Twitter over the weekend that the government lied about its original strategy to fight the pandemic. Even before the start of the Cummings hearing in the House of Commons, a cabinet member dismissed the allegations. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said Wednesday on Sky News that the questioning of Dominic Cummings in Parliament was a sideline. Johnson's ex-confidant has a personal agenda. The minister suggested that Cummings, who left the government in the dispute in November 2020, wanted to retaliate. I leave what his motives are to others, he said. Johnson was speaking in parallel with Cummings' testimony at noon. In Parliament, he answered questions during the so-called Prime Minister's questions. Johnson said he took full responsibility for what happened, but he maintains that the government wanted to save lives and protect the health system using the best scientific advice as a guide. When asked by Parliament, Cummings confirmed a BBC report according to which Johnson initially strictly rejected a new lockdown last fall and instead preferred to accept that, according to Johnson literally, the bodies are piling up by the thousands. When asked if he had heard Johnson say these words, Cummings replied, yes. Johnson had recently denied having made the statement literally or in essence. The sentence did not come, said Johnson. Other cabinet members had supported him. It is therefore clear that only one version can be correct. Either Johnson was lying or now Cummings. Well, both have lied thousands of times. The ex-advisor spoke to members of 2 lower house committees of the British Parliament, as I said, and he left the government in a dispute in November 2020. I have to stress this because what Johnson's people say, that he's on a campaign of revenge, is still possible, of course. Even before the questioning about the corona policy of the Johnson administration, Cummings had repeatedly raised serious allegations via Twitter. And in the hour-long questioning by the British House of Commons, Cummings cracked down on incumbent Health Secretary Matt Hancock as well. Hancock should have been fired for lying in government counselling on pandemic control, Cummings alleged. I think the Health Secretary should have been fired for at least 50-20 things, he said. Hancock lied publicly and on several occasions and in cabinet after cabinet meetings, Cummings claimed. There is no good reason to keep him, and he means Hancock with that. Hancock is said to have falsely stated that there was sufficient protective equipment against the coronavirus available. However, according to Cummings, it was lacking. Even weeks after the outbreak of the pandemic, the procurement of the equipment should not have been sufficient, contrary to Hancock's statements. Cummings had previously criticized an idea allegedly also coming from the ministry. In mid-March, then top-level official Mark Sedwill said that Johnson should call on the population to have coronavirus parties similar to how parents organize chickenpox parties for their children. That was official advice from the Department of Health, Cummings claimed. Johnson himself did little better than Hancock in Cummings' questioning. And once again, he said it was crazy that Johnson was Prime Minister. And when asked whether the current head of government was suitable to lead Great Britain through the corona crisis, he said just no. The Prime Minister initially definitely underestimated the risk of corona. As I said, in February last year, when it all started and quickly started, to say that was just a scary story, what is that? And to have the idea, what I said before, to get yourself injected on live TV with a potentially deadly virus so the people will be completely careless, even the thought about that is crazy. And the government failed to see the signs of the spreading pandemic, said Cummings, who was Johnson's most important and influential advisor at that time. So he must know. So I still can't get it. How could someone work like this? How clueless and careless do people have to be? They dealt with it completely different later on. But the beginning, and just saying dealing with a pandemic is terribly difficult, like Johnson did, or just saying none of these decisions are easy, it's traumatic for any region to go in a lockdown. You have to go in a lockdown if it's dangerous like that. Of course, you harm the economy. But there you have a government and a parliament to make sure that the state will aid those companies that get in danger. it's done in a lot of countries. But just to do nothing, and there I can't say about many things that Cummings is lying, because we all on live TV saw what was happening last year. We all saw what Boris Johnson was saying, even if he's denying stuff he said on live TV now. So that is quite an interesting thing, and I'm quite sure I have another Cummings video tomorrow. So if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Auf Wiedersehen.